Hi, this is Jacqueline Whiting, and this is the first lesson in our series, Don't Take the Bait, News Literacy in the Digital Media Age. I am fortunate to be co-author with my dear friend, Michelle Ludala, of our recently published book, News Literacy, The Keys to Combating Fake News. I'm also a Google certified innovator and a library media specialist. Let's start with a brief history of disinformation, and let's try to take some power away from that term fake news. It's a term that is used inaccurately, and it's also used in really charged ways, which is why we should recalibrate the vocabulary that we use for talking about the information that we consume. Let's talk about disinformation. And by that I mean information that is intentionally spread even though the person who's disseminating the information knows it is inaccurate or false. Disinformation is not something new. This iconic painting, dating back to the founding of the United States, painted by John Trumbull, has layers of disinformation in it. For example, while it is either the signing of or the presentation of the Declaration of Independence, people included in this painting did not all support independence. Some of the people depicted here were anti-independence from the crown. And some people who were in favor of independence, who supported and signed the Declaration of Independence, had died by the time Trumbull created this painting. And so they aren't included because they couldn't sit for their portrait. And if we fast forward a bit in global history, this is an iconic image of Vladimir Lenin speaking to a crowd of people during the creation of the Soviet Empire. This is during the Bolshevik Revolution and the overthrowing of the Tsar. And Lenin is flanked by Trotsky, who, when he fell out of favor with Lenin, was at Lenin's direction removed from all photographic evidence that he had participated in this movement, thereby diminishing the appearance of his influence on the creation of this new nation. And here we have the New York Journal, famous US sensationalist yellow journalism from the turn of the 19th century into the 20th century, where the newspaper claims that the warship Maine was sunk by an enemy, and that enemy was Spain. And of course, when it turns out that this is not how the USS Maine was sunk, some people find that to not be an important point of truth or fact because of the outcome of the Spanish-American War, where the United States won a victory that can be considered quick and easy, if a war can be considered easy at all, gained some colonies, and increased stature in the world. And so that leaves us with the question of where are we today, and are we any more information savvy than our predecessors were? And I would argue that we are not. And the reason we are not is because of the blending of our information, how difficult it is today through our sources of information to distinguish ad from propaganda, from news, from entertainment. And in fact, we have an entire genre of entertainment that is really better described as infotainment. Our savvy is also complicated by another factor that our predecessors did not have to address, and that is the tools of media access that we use. The role of social media in our delivery of information to us and our consumption of media, news, and other forms of information is also a factor in how complicated it is for us to distinguish misinformation from disinformation. This research comes from the Pew Center, and it was research that they conducted surveying teens across the United States at the beginning of 2018, and it was published in May of the same year. And it indicates that YouTube, Instagram, and Snapchat are the most popular online platforms among teens. I have vetted this data with many of the students at my school who almost to 100% of students agree that YouTube, Instagram, and Snapchat are their online forums of choice. And that means that students are receiving information as video and image. Adults when asked these questions, still tend to favor platforms like Facebook, where they are getting video and image, but they're also getting a healthy dose of written words, of text. Students, when given the choice, seem to be deferring to video and image for their information. Furthermore, the smartphone has become the great equalizer, regardless of gender affiliation or gender identity, regardless of ethnic background, regardless of family's level of income or a student's parents' level of education, the smartphone is ubiquitous. Teens across the United States have access to a smartphone at home. Less so, though, the laptop or the desktop, which is something that both we as educators and students as consumers of information need to take into account. Smartphones allow for access to information anywhere, anytime. They may provide information that is condensed or encapsulated to accommodate the view of a smartphone relative to the size of a screen or monitor with a laptop or desktop. And in addition to being on the go, smartphone information is personal and private. It is not an open public screen like a desktop or laptop that allows for parents over shoulder or teachers over shoulder or even peers over shoulder to see and judge maybe what someone is looking at or consuming in terms of information. So we must equip students to unpack information independently, individually, and to bring a critical eye to their media without the pressure or support of people around them who won't be able to see what they're consuming when they're on a smartphone. And the last piece of data, 45% of teens said that they are almost constantly online, and 44% said several times a day. Now, when I say this, there is no judgment in my commenting about students being online. Myself, I have several tablets, a phone, a desktop, a Chromebook. I find myself in that 45% of almost constantly online. What's important here is the dramatic change from just a few years ago to today, and also the impact of being online for a large part of the day. Students are exposed to a tremendous flow of information that can be rather exhausting. And so that's a new skill that they need to develop in order to compartmentalize the information that they are processing so they can process it meaningfully, thoughtfully, and responsibly. And finally, this statement comes from Michael Lynch, who is a professor at the University of Connecticut. This quote comes from an op-ed essay that he wrote that was published in the New York Times in March of 2016. It was also cited in the Sheg Report Executive Summary. And what Dr. Lynch said in his op-ed is that the internet is both the world's best fact checker and the world's best bias confirmer, often at the same time. So if you encounter a piece of media and you want to verify the facts in that chunk of media, the internet will provide you the resources that you would need for that endeavor. At the same time, the internet provides you access to lots of people who believe what you believe, who will reinforce the bias that we naturally each bring to the media we consume. And we have to be careful that while we are fact checking, we don't fall into bias confirmation and make a mistake that one equates to the other.